embers of devotion. The evacuation alarms screamed through the domed research station as Nix Valerian stared at the emergency directive on his screen. All personnel must evacuate Azura within 12 hours. Planet destabilization has reached critical levels. No exceptions. Nix ran his fingers through his dark hair, gazing out at the crystalline landscape that had been his home for 3 years. The once stable formations were now fracturing, sending prismatic lightning through the atmosphere as the planet's core deteriorated. Earth Command had declared Azura a lost cause, its native species deemed non-essential to galactic interests. But they didn't know about Soraya. He found her in the botanical laboratory, carefully preserving seed pods from Azura's luminescent flora. Her silver skin caught the light as she worked, translucent in places to reveal the gentle flow of iridescent fluid that served as her blood. When she looked up, her deep violet eyes met his with immediate understanding. "They've ordered you to leave," she said softly, her voice carrying the musical lilt characteristic of the Azurans. "All of us," Nix corrected, moving closer. "But the evacuation ships won't have room for Azurans. Earth Command has classified your people as—" He couldn't bring himself to say it. "Expendable," Soraya finished for him. She placed down a crystalline container carefully. "We have always known how your leaders view species they cannot profit from." Nix reached out, his fingers hovering near hers. Their relationship had developed slowly, first as research colleagues, then friends, and finally something neither species had language for. The touch of her skin against his sent the usual gentle current between them, a biological reaction that scientists hadn't yet explained. "I can't leave you here to die," he whispered. Outside, the first evacuation ships descended through the fractured atmosphere. Within hours, they would be loaded with research equipment deemed more valuable than Azuran lives. Soraya's people had retreated to ancient underground chambers, hoping to survive what scientists predicted would be a planetary collapse. "Your career, your future," Soraya began. "Mean nothing without you," Nix finished. He activated his communication device. "Dr. Valerian to Commander Reed. I'm requesting permission to remain on Azura with essential medical supplies." The commander's response was immediate and harsh. "Denied. All personnel evacuate." "That's a direct order." As the transmission ended, Nix looked at Soraya, really looked at her, the gentle curve of her face, the wisdom in her eyes, the quiet strength that had drawn him to her from their first meeting. "I've never disobeyed an order before," he said with a small smile. Soraya's expression shifted into what Nix had learned was her species' version of affection, a slight phosphorescent glow emanating from beneath her silver skin. "Then this will be quite the adventure for both of us." Together they gathered supplies while evacuation chaos erupted around them. When Nix's colleague, Dr. Harper, discovered their plan, she silently slipped him emergency medical kits and a data crystal containing research that might help the Azurans survive. As the last ship prepared for departure, Nix stood in the shadows with Soraya, watching humanity abandon a world they deemed worthless, their fingers intertwined, human and Azuran, as the ground beneath them trembled with the warning of destruction to come. The first crystal hurricane hit 3 days after the evacuation. Nix and Soraya huddled with 27 Azuran survivors in the ancient chambers beneath the surface, listening to the howl of crystalline shards tearing across the landscape. The ruins vibrated with each impact, sending dust cascading from ceiling carvings that depicted a history Nix was only beginning to understand. "These chambers were built during the Great Resonance," explained Elder Thelios, his silver skin dulled with age, "when our ancestors learned to stabilize the crystal core through harmonic technologies. Could those technologies be reactivated?" Nix asked, his scientist's mind racing through possibilities as he distributed rations among the group. Soraya translated the complex Azuran terminology for Nix. The stabilization system was powered by consciousness, energy, what you might call a psychic link. It required a merger of minds to generate sufficient power. Her fingers traced ancient glyphs on the wall. But the knowledge was lost centuries ago. As days passed, the small group developed a routine. Nix adapted his xenobiology expertise to help treat injuries from collapsing structures when they ventured out for supplies. During quiet moments, he and Soraya would sit close, her head resting against his shoulder as she taught him Azuran meditation techniques to conserve oxygen. "Your heart beats differently than ours," she murmured one night. Her palm pressed gently against his chest. "Faster, more urgent. Everything about humans seems hurried." Nix smiled, his hand brushing against the luminescent patterns that appeared on her skin when they touched. "Maybe we sense how brief our lives are compared to yours." Their closeness didn't go unnoticed. Veylan, a young male Azuran who had lost his family in the initial earthquakes, watched them with undisguised suspicion. "His kind abandoned us," he said in Azuran, unaware Nix had learned enough to understand. "Yet you trust him with our sacred knowledge." Soraya's response was gentle but firm. "Nix chose us over his own people." He risked everything. The tension dissolved momentarily when a section of their shelter collapsed, forcing the group to venture deeper into the ruins. There they discovered a chamber unlike any other, a perfect dome with a central platform surrounded by crystal pillars that hummed with residual energy despite centuries of dormancy. Thelios gasped, his aged voice trembling. "The Chamber of Resonance. It exists." As the survivors crowded around the ancient technology, Soraya grasped Nix's hand tightly. The crystal pillars responded to their touch, glowing faintly with blue light that spiraled up toward the chamber's ceiling. "It recognizes your presence," whispered Thelios, staring at their joined hands. That night, as others slept, Nix found Soraya studying ancient inscriptions by the light of bioluminescent fungi. When he approached, she looked up with an expression that made his heart stutter. "I've found instructions," she said quietly. "For reactivating the stabilization system." She hesitated. "But Nix, it requires something we never imagined possible, a consciousness bridge between different species." Understanding dawned on him. "Between an Azuran and a human," she nodded, the patterns on her skin pulsing with emotion. "It would be dangerous, intimate beyond anything either of our kinds has experienced." Outside, crystal lightning split the sky as another hurricane formed. Time was running out for Azura. Nix reached out, tracing the luminescent patterns on Soraya's cheek. "Then we'll make history together," he whispered. Part 3. Ancient Whispers. The Chamber of Resonance became their workshop and sanctuary as Azura's destruction accelerated. Nix and Soraya worked tirelessly, translating ancient glyphs, while Elder Thelios guided them through fragmented historical accounts. The other survivors brought salvage technology from the abandoned research station, creating a hybrid system of earth science and Azuran mysticism. The consciousness merger was traditionally performed between Azuran elders, Thelios explained, his frail hands demonstrating the ritual positions. "No record exists of an attempt between different species." "Then we'll write that record," Nix replied, determination overshadowing his fear. Each night, Soraya taught Nix preliminary mental exercises, Azuran meditation techniques that allowed partial consciousness sharing. Their first successful attempt left them both gasping, overwhelmed by the foreign sensation of another's thoughts touching their own. "I felt your memories of Earth," Soraya whispered afterward, her skin glowing with emotional resonance. "Green forests, blue oceans, so much water," Nix smiled, still dazed. "I saw your childhood, running through crystal fields that sang when you touched them." Their progress was interrupted when supplies began disappearing. Medical equipment, food rations, and critical technology components. Suspicion fell on Veylan, whose resentment toward humans had hardened rather than softened. Confronting him in a narrow tunnel, Nix discovered the young Azuran attempting to activate an ancient escape pod, technology the survivors had thought mythical. "This could save several Azurans," Veylan hissed. "Why waste our final resources on an experiment that will likely fail?" "Because it could save everyone," Nix responded, extending his hand. "Your entire world." Their standoff ended when the ground shook violently, collapsing part of the tunnel. Nix pushed Veylan clear of falling debris but was struck himself, a crystalline shard embedding in his shoulder. Despite his injury, he helped the younger Azuran to safety. Soraya's fear was palpable as she treated Nix's wound, her healing touch laced with unprecedented emotion. "I cannot lose you," she admitted, the glow beneath her skin intensifying. Not when I've only just found you. In the privacy of a small alcove, their mutual fear transformed into something deeper. Soraya's touch against Nyx's skin created cascading bioluminescent patterns where their bodies met. Their kiss, an adaptation of a human gesture she had learned, sent electromagnetic pulses between them that made the nearby crystals resonate in harmonic response. My people have no word for what I feel for you, she whispered against his lips. Humans have too many words. And none of them are enough, he responded, drawing her closer. Their intimacy was both physical and metaphysical, her silver skin against his. Minds partially merged through Azuran techniques, sharing sensations that transcended species boundaries. In those moments, the distinction between human and Azuran seemed arbitrary, a biological footnote rather than a defining limitation. Afterward, lying together as crystal storms raged above, Nyx described Earth's night sky, promising to show her constellations if they survived. Soraya traced patterns on his skin that told Azuran legends of cosmic creation. Their peaceful moment ended when Elder Thelios urgently summoned them. The planet's core destabilization had accelerated beyond predictions. They had hours, not days, to attempt the consciousness merger. As they hurried to the chamber of resonance, Valen approached them. Without words, he offered Nyx the final component they needed, salvaged from the escape pod he'd abandoned. Save our world, he said simply. Prove me wrong about humans. The chamber of resonance thrummed with energy as the remaining survivors arranged crystal amplifiers in precise geometric patterns. Outside, the planet's surface fractured in spectacular cataclysms, sending shock waves that threatened to collapse their sanctuary. Time had become their most precious and limited resource. Nyx and Soraya sat facing each other on the central platform, surrounded by concentric rings of ancient technology merged with salvaged research equipment. Elder Thelios moved slowly around them, placing neural interfaces at specific points, a circuit designed to channel and amplify their consciousness energy. Once initiated, the merger cannot be halted without risking permanent neural damage, Thelios warned, his voice grave. Your minds will become one temporarily to generate the harmonic frequency needed to stabilize our core. Soraya reached for Nyx's hands, her violet eyes steady despite her fear. There's something I must tell you before we begin. Our consciousness merger, it leaves traces, permanent echoes. Meaning? Nyx asked, though part of him already understood. We will carry pieces of each other forever, she said softly. Thoughts, memories, emotional patterns. The boundary between us will never again be absolute. Nyx considered this, the ultimate intimacy, the irreversible merging of self with other. In the face of such profound connection, his remaining hesitation dissolved. I can think of worse fates than carrying part of you with me always, he said, squeezing her hands. The ritual began with Azuran chanting, the survivors creating harmonic resonances that activated the chamber's dormant systems. As neural interfaces activated, Nyx and Soraya maintained eye contact, anchoring each other as the first wave of consciousness exchange washed through them. The initial connection felt like falling through endless space. Nyx gasped as Soraya's memories flooded his mind, centuries of Azuran history experienced through her ancestors' genetic memory. The delicate perception of crystal harmonics that her species navigated as easily as humans processed visual information. The profound loneliness she'd felt as the only Azuran working closely with the human research team. Simultaneously, Soraya experienced the chaotic intensity of human consciousness, Nyx's childhood in Earth's last rainforest preserve, his grief when climate collapse claimed his homeland, the driving curiosity that led him to xenobiology, and beneath it all, his growing devotion to her, that had made his choice to stay behind inevitable, rather than heroic. Stay. With me. Her voice echoed in his mind as the merger deepened, beyond memories into raw consciousness. The boundary between them blurred further. Was it his heart racing or hers? Were those his tears or hers tracking down their cheeks? The distinction became meaningless as their merged consciousness expanded outward, connecting with the ancient systems. Through their joined perception, they understood what the ancient Azurans had created, a technology that used consciousness as a harmonic stabilizer, tuning the planet's crystalline core like an instrument. The knowledge of how to manipulate these energies flowed between them, intuitive rather than intellectual. As they directed their merged consciousness toward the planetary core, they encountered resistance. Centuries of instability had created dissonant patterns that fought their attempts at harmonization. The strain manifested physically. Blood trickled from Nix's nose while luminescent fluid seeped from Soraya's eyes. "We're losing them!" someone shouted, distant and irrelevant to their shared experience. In the space between their merged minds, Nix and Soraya created something new, neither human nor Azuran, but a third consciousness born from their union. This emergent entity understood how to transform the dissonance into harmony, converting destructive energy into regenerative patterns. As the planet's core began responding, stabilizing increments at a time, their physical forms convulsed with the effort of maintaining the merger beyond its intended duration. The chamber's crystals glowed with blinding intensity, responding to the unprecedented energy flowing through the ancient system. Just before consciousness fled entirely, they shared a final perfect moment of unity, complete understanding, absolute acceptance, love transcending biological categories. Then darkness claimed them both as their bodies collapsed on the chamber floor, still connected by the neural interfaces in their intertwined hands. Rebirth's dawn Nix awakened to unfamiliar sensations. Crystal harmonics resonating through his bones, perceptions of electromagnetic fields around him, and genetic memories that were distinctly not his own. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a recovery chamber, Soraya unconscious beside him, her silver skin now patterned with faint traces of human pigmentation. "They're awake," called a voice, and Elder Thelios appeared, looking both exhausted and exhilarated. "You succeeded. The core stabilization has begun." Nix tried to speak, but instead of words, a musical tone emerged, the Azuran language he had never been able to pronounce correctly before. Startled, he touched his throat, finding it unchanged, yet somehow different. "The merger left traces, as we warned," Thelios explained gently. "You carry aspects of each other now. The changes appear to be accelerating as your bodies adjust." When Soraya finally stirred, her first words were in perfect English, though she had always struggled with human languages before. Her eyes widened as she looked at Nix, seeing the subtle changes in him that mirrored her own. "I can feel you," she whispered, "not just remember you. A part of you lives in me." They discovered other changes in the days that followed. Nix could perceive the crystal harmonics that had previously been exclusive to Azuran senses. Soraya developed the human capacity for intuitive mathematical thinking. Their cellular structures had begun adopting properties from both species, creating something entirely new. The planetary stabilization progressed more rapidly than anyone had predicted. The crystal hurricanes subsided, and the violent core fluctuations settled into manageable patterns. Areas of the surface that had been uninhabitable for generations began showing signs of recovery. A week after the consciousness merger, their instruments detected approaching ships. Earth Command had returned, likely to salvage technology from what they expected to be a dead world. The communication came through on emergency channels. "Research Station Azura, this is Earth Command Vessel Horizon. We're detecting life signs. Please respond." Nix and Soraya exchanged a glance, their connection allowing them to communicate without words. Together, they crafted a response that would forever change relations between their peoples. When Commander Reed himself descended to the surface, expecting to find a miracle of survival or a data error, he instead encountered something unprecedented. A thriving Azuran community led by a pair of beings who were neither fully human nor fully Azuran. Nix and Soraya greeted him together, the physical changes in both now impossible to ignore. "What happened here?" Reed demanded, visibly unsettled by Nix's transformation. "You directly disobeyed evacuation orders. We discovered that our species are not as separate as we believed," Nix replied, his voice carrying harmonic undertones. "The Azurans aren't expendable, Commander. They're our future. The revelation that the consciousness technology could stabilize not just Azura, but potentially other dying crystal-based planets throughout the galaxy transformed Earth Command's dismissal into desperate interest. What had been deemed worthless became priceless overnight. Soraya, with her new understanding of human politics, negotiated terms that protected her people from exploitation. The merged consciousness she shared with Nyx gave them unique insight into both species' motivations and fears, making them ideal ambassadors between worlds. As Earth ships established a permanent diplomatic presence on Azura, Nyx and Soraya often retreated to the crystal fields that were slowly regenerating. There, beneath twin moons, they shared the continuing evolution of their bond, neither fully separate nor completely merged, but something beautiful in its complexity. "Do you regret staying?" Soraya asked one evening, her head resting against his chest as they watched crystalline flowers bloom in response to moonlight. Nyx smiled, experiencing her question through both his human empathy and the Azuran emotional resonance he had gained. "How could I regret finding home?" Around them, Azura continued its slow healing, a planet reborn through the connection of two beings who had defied both nature and orders to discover what was possible when boundaries dissolved. Their legacy would continue in the generations that followed, children of both worlds and neither, carrying forward the harmony they had created from destruction's edge. As the stars emerged above them, Nyx pointed out Earth's distant sun while Soraya shared Azuran constellation stories, their voices blending in the cool evening air. Two species, one voice, speaking of a future neither had imagined possible before they chose each other above all else.